The Messiah and the Secret of Israel, the true meaning of turning the other cheek, reclaiming the strength of Jesus' teachings. For centuries, the phrase "turn the other cheek" has been a cornerstone of Christian teaching, often interpreted as a call to passive nonviolence, humility, and forgiveness. Derived from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, specifically Matthew chapter 5, verse 39, this passage has traditionally been understood as instructing believers to endure mistreatment without resistance, to respond to insult and injury with submission rather than retaliation. However, this conventional interpretation raises important questions. How do we reconcile this idea of passivity with the broader context of Jesus' life and actions? Was Jesus truly advocating for his followers to accept harm without any form of resistance, or might there be a deeper, more empowering message embedded within his words? Greek text analysis. A closer look at the original meaning. To uncover the true intent behind Jesus' words, we must return to the original Greek text of Matthew chapter 5, verse 39. The verse reads, "Ego delego umin me antistenai tu ponero, all ostis serapise ais ten dexian siagona, strepson autokai ten allen." This is commonly translated as, "But I say to you, do not resist the evil one, but whoever strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also." The key term here is strepson, which is often translated as turn. While this has been interpreted as a directive to offer the other cheek for further insult, the word strepson also means to turn around or to change direction. This subtle nuance in the Greek suggests a different kind of action, one that is not about passive submission, but about an active, strategic response. By turning around, Jesus could be instructing his followers to refuse to engage in the same violent or retaliatory behavior, to instead find a way to disrupt the cycle of aggression through a morally superior response. This interpretation aligns with Jesus' broader teachings of love, justice, and wisdom, encouraging a response that is both dignified and transformative. Historical and cultural context. Understanding first-century Judea. To fully appreciate the revolutionary nature of this teaching, we must consider the social and cultural dynamics of first-century Judea. In this context, a backhanded slap to the right cheek was more than just a physical blow. It was a symbolic gesture of insult and domination. It was a way for a person of higher status to assert their superiority over someone they deemed inferior. Instructing someone to turn around or away in this context was not about inviting further harm, but rather about challenging the power dynamics at play. By turning around or the other way, the victim forces the aggressor to confront them as an equal, thereby disrupting the intended humiliation and asserting their own dignity. This act of nonviolent resistance exposes the injustice of the situation and forces the oppressor to rethink their actions. This understanding reveals that Jesus was not advocating for his followers to accept mistreatment passively. Instead, he was teaching them how to resist evil in a way that was morally righteous, strategically effective, and ultimately transformative. Stories of Jesus supporting nonviolent resistance. To further illuminate this interpretation, let us examine several key moments in Jesus' life where he demonstrated strategic nonviolent resistance. Jesus and the cleansing of the temple. In all four Gospels, we find the story of Jesus cleansing the temple. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all recount this powerful event. When Jesus entered the temple and saw the money changers and merchants exploiting the faithful, he responded with righteous indignation. He drove them out, overturned their tables, and declared, "My house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers." This decisive action was not about passive acceptance of wrongdoing. It was a powerful demonstration of Jesus standing up against corruption and exploitation. He confronted the systemic injustice directly, using strategic force to cleanse the sacred space. This story emphasizes the importance of righteous anger and decisive action, especially when it comes to defending what is sacred or confronting systemic injustices. In its deeper meaning, Jesus is urging the people of Israel to cleanse their own lives and seek repentance. Jesus and the woman caught in adultery. In John chapter 8 verses 1 through 11, the Pharisees bring a woman caught in adultery to Jesus, asking if she should be stoned according to the law of Moses. Instead of directly answering, Jesus challenges them with a profound statement. Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Convicted by their own consciences, the accusers leave, and Jesus tells the woman, "Go now and leave your life of sin." In this moment, Jesus skillfully diffuses a potentially lethal situation without resorting to violence or excusing the woman's sin. He turns the situation around by challenging the moral authority of the accusers, forcing them to reflect on their own sins. This story illustrates how turning the other cheek can mean using wisdom to turn the tables on those who seek to harm others, thus avoiding further conflict while achieving a just outcome. Jesus' arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane. When soldiers came to arrest Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, this is recounted in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. One of his disciples, Peter, drew a sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Jesus immediately rebuked him, saying, "Put your sword back in its place, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword." He then healed the servant's ear and allowed himself to be arrested. This moment highlights Jesus' commitment to nonviolence, even when faced with betrayal and imminent arrest. His rebuke of Peter underscores the principle that violence only begets more violence. Jesus' healing of the servant demonstrates that true strength lies in mercy and healing, not in retaliation. This story supports the interpretation that choosing nonviolence is about maintaining one's integrity and purpose, rather than escalating violence. Jesus and the tribute money. In Matthew chapter 22 verses 15 to 22, and parallel passages in Mark chapter 12 verses 13 to 17, and Luke chapter 20 verses 20 to 26, the Pharisees and Herodians try to trap Jesus with a question about paying taxes to Caesar. They ask him, "Is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not?" Jesus, perceiving their malice, asks for a coin and then asks, "Whose image is this?" When they reply, "Caesar's," he tells them, "Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." Here, Jesus skillfully avoids the trap set for him by answering in a way that upholds both civil and divine obligations. This response demonstrates Jesus' ability to navigate complex situations with wisdom, ensuring that he does not fall into the traps set by his adversaries. It reinforces the idea of nonviolence can involve a strategic response that avoids unnecessary conflict while still upholding one's principles. During his trial before Pilate, as recorded in John chapter 18 verses 28 to 38 and John chapter 19 verses 8 to 11, Jesus remains mostly silent, responding calmly when questioned about his kingship. He states, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here." When Pilate questions him further, Jesus simply says, "You could have no power at all against me, unless it had been given you from above." Jesus' demeanor during his trial shows a profound understanding of his mission and the spiritual authority behind it. He does not resist or try to argue his way out of crucifixion, because he understands that this is part of a greater plan. His calm and composed responses demonstrate a level of control and purpose that transcends the immediate circumstances. Jesus' actions throughout the Gospels demonstrate that he did not advocate for passivity in the face of danger. In John chapter 8, verse 59, for example, when an angry crowd sought to stone him, Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. This was not an act of cowardice, but a strategic decision to preserve his life and mission. This example suggests that Jesus understood the importance of avoiding unnecessary harm, especially when it did not serve a greater purpose. In spiritual law, the right to protect oneself is recognized, particularly when one's life or mission is at stake. This principle does not contradict the call to nonviolence. Rather, it complements it by emphasizing the need for discernment in how we respond to aggression. The decision to turn around or to flee should be guided by wisdom, with the aim of aligning one's actions with divine purpose and the greater good. Some might argue that the traditional interpretation of turning the other cheek as a form of passive nonviolence is more consistent with Jesus' overall message of love and forgiveness. While nonviolence is indeed central to Jesus' teachings, it is important to distinguish between passive acceptance and active resistance. The interpretation presented here does not negate the importance of nonviolence. Rather, it redefines it in a way that empowers individuals to stand up against injustice without resorting to violence themselves. By turning the other way, believers are not submitting to harm, but are instead challenging the very foundation of the aggression, exposing its futility and injustice. This interpretation also addresses the concern that Jesus' teachings might be used to justify passivity in the face of systemic injustice. By understanding turning the other way as a form of active, non-violent resistance, we can see how this teaching can be applied to broader social and political struggles, encouraging believers to confront injustice in ways that are both effective and morally grounded. The true message of turning the other way is far from a call to passive acceptance of harm. By returning to the original Greek text and understanding the historical context, we can see that Jesus was teaching a form of non-violent resistance that is both strategic and empowering. This response requires immense inner strength, self-control, and spiritual maturity, challenging believers to rise above the instinct for retaliation and to engage with the world in a way that reflects the highest spiritual ideals. By turning around instead of simply turning the other cheek, we are called to take control of our response to aggression, to choose a path that aligns with divine wisdom rather than human impulses. This approach allows us to maintain our dignity and integrity even in the face of mistreatment, and to reject the cycle of violence that so often governs human interactions. For modern believers, this teaching remains profoundly relevant. In a world filled with conflict, injustice, and violence, the challenge is to find ways to respond that do not perpetuate harm, but instead promote peace, justice, and love. Whether it involves standing firm in the face of aggression, turning away from conflict when necessary, or creatively confronting injustice, the true meaning of turning the other way is a call to action, an invitation to engage with the world in a way that transforms both the self and society. By reclaiming this deeper understanding, we can see that Jesus' teachings were not about passivity, but about empowering individuals to live out their faith with courage, wisdom, and a commitment to justice. This is the true strength of Jesus' message, and it is a message that continues to resonate across the ages, offering guidance for how we can navigate the challenges of our own time with moral clarity and spiritual integrity.